So the next presentation is going to be by Dr. Catherine Hedgewich. She is a project scientist at the University of California, Merced in the Applied Climate Science Lab. She maintains large climate data sets and develops web tools to improve the accessibility of climate data. Welcome, Catherine.
Thanks, Sean. And everyone can hear me okay, right? Awesome. Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about the Climate Toolbox, particularly as we can look at future data in the Climate Toolbox to inform Sagebrush planning. And so the Climate Toolbox is a collection of over 20 different tools that can be used to explore summaries of climate, both past, present, and future on maps and graphs. And the Climate Toolbox is free for use and can be found by navigating any browser. Here I'm in the Chrome browser to climatetoolbox.org. And so that's what I'm at right now. And when you go there, you will see this landing page here. Yep. And so each of these boxes represents one of the different tools in the toolbox. So you can see there are a lot of tools right now. And the names of the tools can give you an indication as to what kind of tool it's, what time scale it's looking at. So for example, like here I have a list of the tools here. If they have a historical in the front of their name, they're looking at past data. And then if they have a future in the front of their name, they're looking at future data, and that can just help. And then we also have a mapping tool, which is our climate mapper, and our data download tool, and a variable lookup tool too. And we have some forecast tools. And once you can get to the different tools by clicking on each of these as a tool, and you can click on the launch tool button to open it in the browser. So the goal of the Climate Toolbox generally is just to help make climate data accessible for decision-making related to climate, water, fire danger, and agriculture. And we're providing summaries on maps and graphs so that you can start interpreting the story behind the data without any data wrangling. But if you want to wrangle data, the Toolbox also has a data download tool to help you to download the data. So the power of all these tools in the toolbox really comes from the data sets that they're based on. The data sets are scientifically sound and are used by climate researchers in published and peer-reviewed literature like the National Climate Assessments. And to just get some information on the data, we can actually use this menu bar at the top here where we have data and we have a data overview. So I'm going to use the Climate Toolbox to kind of go through this presentation today. So we have a data overview of the different types of tools in the toolbox, the data that's in the toolbox. And so the climate data in the toolbox is all produced by our group at University of California, Merced, which is led by John Abotsoglu. And our past weather data is the GridMet data set. It's available, and we have some forecasted subseasonal and seasonal climate data. And then we also have future climate projections from CMIP5, which is the older future climate projections from the global climate models. But we are looking to add the newer CMIP6 very shortly as I'm running those. So those will be going into the Climate Toolbox soonish. Yep. And then we also have some other data sets in the Climate Toolbox. Some of them are shown here. We have some past hydrology and some future hydrology and streamflow projections. And then we also have other data sets that aren't listed here as well. Yeah, so the future data, I can look some more information about the future data by clicking on this. The future climate data comes from the IPCC's CMIP5 project. And these are global climate models from all over the world that are running scenarios for the future. And we have 20 different global climate models that are used in the Climate Toolbox. And then each of them, there are 2 future scenarios. We have a low emissions RCP 4.5, and we have the high emissions RCP 8.5. Which used to represent a business as usual continuation of emissions back in 2010, but now with less reliance on coal worldwide, it's not the business as usual. But we have those 2 scenarios in the toolbox. And then this these global outputs, these climate outputs from CMIP5 then were statistically downscaled using the MACA method with the GridMet training data set, and that was done by our group. And so what the result is that we have daily data from 1950 to 2014 for the historical period, and 2 future scenarios from 2015 to 2100. We have 20 different global climate models and 2 future scenarios. It covers the contiguous USA at 4-kilometer resolution. Yeah, so that's basically our these future data. And from the data, we have lots of different variables. So the downscale data has both minimum and maximum daily temperature, total precipitation, specific humidity, relative humidity, min and max daily. It has wind speed and downward solar radiation. So a lot of the variables that are of interest in ecological modeling. And that was the point of us creating this data set. But we also have, in addition to all those raw climate data, we have a lot of derived metrics over the toolbox that are the metrics that tend to be the ones that are of interest to decision makers, because they're related to either agriculture, their growing degree days, or it's the start of the growing season, or the first fall freeze, I'm sorry, the last fall freeze, or the first spring freeze. So we have lots of different metrics like that. And in the different tools in the toolbox, there are different variables in each of the tools. And so that can be kind of confusing, because you may be looking for a certain metric. And so the very first tool that I'm going to look at is the Find Your Variable tool, because it is basically a reverse lookup of variables. So these are all the different variables that exist in the tools somewhere. So you can see there are a lot of derived metrics. We have chill hours, we have potential evapotranspiration, climate water deficit. We have a bunch of drought metrics, a bunch of hydrology metrics, fire danger, and even vegetation modeling as well. So this tool, basically, you can look at growing degree, you can pick your variable and you can see which tools have that variable in them. And so that can be useful if you're actually looking for information about a certain metric for a species of plants. Yeah. And so there, yep. So, yeah, so I already covered that you can see the time scale of the different tools by the variable name. So we have historical data, historical tools, and future tools. And then I just wanted to show you a quick introduction to a sample future tool. So I'm going to look at the future box plots tool. And we get an initial splash screen here where we can actually take a tour of the tool. We can set a location, or we can go to the tool. And I'm just going to go to the tool initially here and guide you through it with my own tour. And so, and you can also, up in the right-hand corner here is where you can start the tour, or you can also look at documentation on the tool as far as the data sets that are being used in this tool. Definitions for some of the different variables that are used in the tool, and also calculate information on the calculations. So Stephanie referred to how some of the tool you want to understand, like what time periods were being used to create averages, or how certain calculations were done. This is where you would find that kind of information. So the documentation is up in the right-hand corner for all of the tools in the toolbox. And the very first thing that you might do here in this future box plots tool, we're going to make a box plot of the different model projections, which are these little dots for the historical period, for early, mid, and late century. And we're going to see the spread of projections across the 20 different models. And we get to choose our variable and also potentially a season for that variable. And we also get to choose our location and our emission scenario. So the first thing to do maybe is to select a location, and all the tools are pretty much the same layout. So with the selecting of a location, we can look at a point location. We can also look at an area average over some different preset variables, and we can also draw our own custom polygon or upload a shapefile. So that's what the custom polygon is. So just to start, I'm just going to look at a point location, and I'm going to choose my location by opening this window here. And then once I have this, I can enter in a location, and the marker will go there. I can also manually drag it, like to Boise, and things will update. I can also enter the coordinates directly if I need to really fine tune this. And then of course you can also zoom in to really place this marker where you want to place it. Additionally, grid cells, the grid cells are available for the data because this is gridded data. So it can be really useful to actually see those grid cells, to know if, because the data is being pulled for the grid cell center. And so if you put a marker anywhere within this grid cell here, you're going to get the same data back. If you move it to another grid cell, then you'll get the data for that back. But it can be really useful just to see the grid cells. So anyway, so I'm setting a location here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at Craters of the Moon. I'm sorry, of the Moon, which is in the Snake River Plain and north of Boise. And so that's setting the location. Once I set the location, actually the whole tool updates and the graph now is for Craters of the Moon. And then I can select the variable. So I can look by clicking this, I can just select any of these different variables that are available for the tool. And you can see that there's a lot of different derived variables here, like hottest day temperatures and days with maximum minimum temperature above 32. Here, I'm just going to look at maximum temperature. So I won't necessarily, or maybe I'll look at minimum temperature, and I'll look at some different seasons. I can either look at annual minimum temperature or one of these seasons, and I can look at springtime minimum temperatures. And I can choose either 4.5 or 8.5 for the emissions, for the future emissions area, and I'll keep it right there. So some of the things to note then, once we have the tool, the graph updates after we select all these different options, and you can see just how easy it was to get this graph. The different dots again are the 20 different climate models. You can hover over them to see the actual values. You can also hover over the box plot to see the statistics of the box plot. So the blue line here is the median, and then the edges of the box plot here are the 5th and 95th percentile, but we also have the min and the maximum as well. Yeah, so something you can see from these different things is like for temperature over the century here, there's mostly a very clear trend. So you can look at the blue lines, you can see that there's increasing springtime minimum temperature for this location. And the range of variability, the uncertainty in the different models is increasing a bit as time goes on, which is totally to be expected. But the trend in the data is clearly increasing, and all of the models are agreeing on that trend as well. You can see that for temperature. When we look at something like precipitation, we start to see more model variability, where some of the models predict increases, and some of them could even predict decreases as well, because the strength and the signal for change in precipitation is not as strong. Overall, for annual precipitation, like in Craters of the Moon, I think there is a projection for a slight increase for annual precipitation. You can see that in the lines here, but that some of the models are differing. So like, for example, this model here actually has a projected decrease just by a little bit. But there's uncertainty in all of this. So there's a projected increase probably in precipitation, probably due to the fact that the warmer atmosphere holds more water, so that we'll have higher precipitation events. And but the difference between looking at annual precipitation or seasonal precipitation can change the answer. So for example, if we look at summertime precipitation, there is a projection for a slight decrease here, a slight drying when we look at all of the models together. But some of the models differ in that. And so these trends are pretty much true for the Intermountain West, where there's a projection for decreases in summertime precipitation, but a little bit of an increase in winter precipitation. And these seasonal changes may really impact key processes like germination, insect hatches, and land managers are going to have to think hard about what variables and timings are important for the situations that they're facing. And here we can also see that there's a difference between looking at the mean from these 20 different climate models and looking at the extremes, the model extremes. When doing scenario planning, we may want to look at the extremes, as these are likely representing more vulnerabilities in the species that we're looking at. So another tool that really helps us with doing scenario planning is the Future Climate Scatter. And I'm just going to get it from here. So Future Climate Scatter. And this tool lets you visualize the space of model projections over 2 variables. So this is the cloud of projections here for the historical period for all the different 20 models. And we have winter precipitation on the y-axis and summertime maximum temperature on the x-axis here. So we've got a gray cloud of the historical values from the different 20 models. And we've got for the mid-century RCP 8.5 high scenario, we've got a yellow cloud here of model projections, different model projections. So for example, if I again look at craters of the moon, oh my gosh, yep. I set my location, and then this one I have to actually update, make a request for this. So I'm going to look at winter precipitation and minimum springtime minimum temperature. And when I make the request here, the graph will update. And so we can see in some of the models project warmer temperatures, like over here. And then some of the models project, with respect for precip, wetter models, the ones that have higher precipitation or lower. So like, for example, here, this Maroc 5 model may represents a warmer but drier model, which may be a model of interest in looking at a species and how it might be vulnerable to that kind of scenario for springtime minimum temperatures and winter precipitation, for looking at soil moisture and possible germination of seeds. So we can take that model, the Maroc 5, as a warmer but drier model, and go into another tool to actually see what the projections are in terms of other variables. So there's another tool called the Future Climate Scenarios tool, where you can take that same location, you can look at mid-century, and here you can enter in the RCP 8.5, and I can find my Maroc 5 model, which is my warmer, drier model. And I can look for that model at a host of different metrics. So I can look at all kinds of different things like fire danger days and some hydrology metrics, some different values over the different seasons for potential evapotranspiration. And then I can also look at some derived metrics like growing degree days or hottest summer day, day of first fall freeze. And I can basically look for that model, what that model says about all these other metrics. And then I can make a report, and I can see for the report, I can see for that location what that model says about all these different metrics, and that can give you an idea for that location, like how a species might fare if they have like critical thresholds for the future that need to be for appropriate habitat. Or yeah, so we can look at what these scenarios say about the future in different metrics. And we can also download the spatial data for these different metrics as well in this tool. But sometimes it's not really clear what a projection really means when you get numbers like this. This helps a little bit if you really know your habitat and you really know what these numbers mean for your habitat. But a lot of times it's hard to understand what a difference in 1 degree Fahrenheit change in springtime temperatures or a 1.5 Fahrenheit change really means. And so the toolbox has another tool. It is the climate analogs tool, the future climate analogs tool here, that helps you to understand the projected changes in time by trading time for space. And so in this tool here, we can look at future climate analogs, and the future climate analogs attempt to answer the question, where do we find a climate today that will resemble the future climate of a location? And then managers, we can look at these current locations to see what's growing there, what management actions are being taken there to deal with issues, and see this as a model for how to adapt to the climate that is changing to the future. So this concept may not be as familiar to you, so I wanted to walk through it a little bit. So here, this location, this tool is actually just available for national park locations, but it's amazing how much information you can actually get. So this is one of the reasons why I chose Crater of the Moon. Craters of the Moon is a national park here in Idaho, and I can select that location. And then the next thing we can do in this tool is to select a definition for climate. And so the future climate analogs are going to differ depending on what we decide is our version of climate. So for example, here, I'm just going to show, I'm going to look at the temperature of the hottest month. And so in terms of the temperature of the hottest month, what this map here is showing is 4 craters of the moon, and it's looking at the current day climate of craters of the moon. So currently, craters of the moon has an average maximum temperature for the hottest month of 86 Fahrenheit. And those areas in blue here, it's actually over the whole contiguous USA. Those are locations that are close to 86 Fahrenheit that have a current day maximum temperature of the hottest month that's close to 86. So you can see if I hover and click on these other things, they have current day values that are close to 86. They're within 1 standard deviation of 86. And that's the dark blue. So the dark blue are the best climate analogs. And then the levels of green are areas that are 1 to 2 standard deviations away from 86. So they're farther away. They're not as close in climate to craters. And so what we can do here, we can look at the dark blue then are the locations of the climate analogs for crater. And here I'm looking at current day climate analogs. And what we can do then is kind of zooming in a little bit on craters here. And we see this dark blue here of other locations that have a similar climate in terms of hottest month. Then we can change the scenario and look at craters for the early part of this 21st century and see where those future climate analogs move. So craters went from 86 to 89 in the mid part of the early part, and the dark blue areas are then the current day locations that are similar to this 89. So similar to craters future. And if I animate this a little bit, I can look at the early, then I can look at the later and later, and you can see that dark blue move. And you can see that the dark blue is the locations of the future climate analogs, and they're moving down in elevation, and they're also moving down in latitude, reflecting what they need to do to increase, to be similar to the future of craters. And let's see. Another really important point here is that, so these are locations of future climate analogs, is that here I've chosen the maximum temperature of the hottest month. But if I change that globally here, if I change it, instead of looking at analogs for maximum temperature of the hottest month, if I change to minimum temperature of the coldest month, I get a new set of analogs. Here, the craters, the minimum temperature is 8 Fahrenheit, and it's more similar to locations here in Montana, in Utah, and Colorado. in places in Colorado and other locations here that have that same minimum temperature. So depending on which which variable I look at, I'll get different analogs. And in fact, there is a tool, there's an option here in the tool to look at the intersection where we look at a 2-variable combination of temperature of the hottest month and temperature of the coldest month and see where the climate analogs for that are. These analogs are probably closer to the truth, as climate is a amalgamation of all these kinds of different things. It's the precipitation, the wind, the temperature, the radiation, it's everything. So if I could add more variables, I would. But then we can see this is more of a true version of the climate analogs. And so here we have the current day climate analogs for craters. And then if I advance this to the early century, we see that starting to move down and move down and move down. But then there's a danger in that as we move into the future, there could be fewer locations where there are climates that actually match this. And so you see that there aren't so many dark blues here. Dark blues are the best climate analogs, and there's only one location here. And so it could be that in the future, a climate analog, there are no current day analogs for the future of craters. And so that can be a problem. Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good overview of this tool. This tool is a very general tool for ecologists to start getting an understanding of the future climate projections in terms of spatial locations. There can be some general uses of these ideas for general species distributions or fire danger perimeters, but there are other tools out there that can do a better job probably at looking at future analogs for specific species where definitions are more detailed to that to the species. So Michelle now is going to talk about a tool for understanding the history of an area better and setting up seeds for success. And then Bryce is going to talk a little bit more about a tool where he to look to where to find seeds for the future with climate analogs, where he's actually looking at 18 different variables. So that's pretty different than the 2 that I have. And that concludes my piece.